were interested in this topic, but not able to make it today. And we may have some folks that are just logging on, but I want to respect your time for being prompt. I am excited to have Nancy Schmitt here to be your presenter. Nancy has more than 40 years of education experience. Is
Would
that
you
right,
believe
Nancy?
48?
48. She has taught at the primary level, the secondary level, and the adult education level. And for the last number of years, she has been an ESL instructor at the Troy Adult Education Center, which is one of the premier adult education programs here in Oakland County. And I've had the pleasure of knowing her through the Oakland Literacy Council Book Club the last year, which is something, it's open to anybody who likes to read on the side. Nancy is a very enthusiastic person, and she has worked lately more with advanced students, but I asked her to keep in mind that some of you have intermediate students, and maybe a few of you have even lower level students here. But I asked her to share some tips to help with conversation, because we all know that's what our students really want to do. They want to feel comfortable talking with people that they meet in their neighborhood and at their child's school. And that is one of the hardest things to do when you're learning a new language. You can stop and reread something to get the meaning, but being live in a conversation with somebody can be nerve-wracking. Even for those of us who are native speakers, sometimes going to a party can be nerve-wracking to start a conversation with somebody. So what I'm going to do is mute everybody.
You want to buy him?
Did that work?
Oh.
Yes. But Nancy, I'm going to ask to unmute you. There you go. And I'm going to turn this over to Nancy because she has a presentation. She's going to share some resources and some ideas with you. And then at the end, we'll open it up for questions or exchange of ideas to hear what you have done that maybe others could benefit from. So take it away, Nancy.
Thank you so much, Lori. And I'm really excited about being here with you today. I'm a big talker, and I really like to encourage students to talk to anybody and everybody that they meet in order to improve their English. Like Lori told you, I started as a kindergarten teacher in Rochester for 28 years. Then I taught 9th grade at a bilingual school in Saltillo, Coahuila, Mexico. And while I was there, I also did an adult ESL program for some administrators who couldn't speak very good English. And that gave me the idea that when we moved back to Troy, I wanted to be an ESL teacher. And I've been working at the Troy schools since 2007 for 14 years as an adult ESL teacher. And conversation is something every student wants more of. So I'd like, with a show of hands, how many people work with beginner level students? How many of you work with beginner level? One? Only one? Two? How about intermediate? Is your student that you're volunteering with intermediate? Wow, a lot of you work with intermediate. And how about advanced? A couple more with advanced. Okay, so I'm going to gear this kind of to the intermediate speaker. That's where you had the most of you raised your hand for. Now, before I get started, does anybody have a specific concern or question about conversation that you want me to address? Does anybody have a specific question in mind? Because if you do, I wish you would unmute yourself and share that question with me, so I'll make sure I answer it. I don't see any hands. Ooh, Shannon, you have a question?
One thing I struggle with is
the word is escaping me right now, but not so much corrections as kind of giving my student language that she could use to vary her speech more, or maybe sound, a little higher register or lower register. So kind of those extensions and how to do that tactfully, or like when to do it.
So I'm hearing you say to me, Shannon, my students, I'm doing some reflective speaking here. Shannon, I heard you say that you want to give your student help in varying the vocabulary they use in conversation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so you want to vary the vocabulary. All right, I'm going to share my screen, students, and pull up my slides. Can you all see conversations?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of scoot you over a bit. Can you all see this lesson plan for teaching students how to start a conversation? Everybody can see it?
Yes.
Good. Okay. One of the most important things I tell my students is to remember, if they're starting a conversation with somebody, is to smile. Smile when you introduce yourself. Americans, when they see a smiling face, they assume that you're friendly, nice. If you have a frown or a scowl, they're leery of you. So I encourage my students to smile when they introduce themselves. It used to be that we would say, introduce yourself and shake hands. But with COVID time, nobody's shaking hands. And so we talk about how when you introduce yourself, you should smile and maybe nod your head to greet someone. If you're entering a conversation already underway, such as at an activity at your child's school, you might introduce yourself and say, my child is in 4th grade. What is your child? Or my child's teacher is Ms. White. Who's your child's teacher? If you're starting a conversation with somebody you meet at a store, you might ask, do you recommend this brand? Or you can talk about the weather. I'm so glad it's not too hot. Or isn't it a rainy day? Personal introductions. In a way that invites further conversation, you might explain yourself. You might explain that I repair cell phones, and you wouldn't believe some of the accidents people have with their phones. You could teach your student to, when they introduce themselves, to explain who they are or what they do. If you're fishing for a topic when you meet an American, your student meets an American, you might say, if you're at a restaurant, how did you like your meal? Or speaking of a great meal, we ate at Charlie's restaurant last night. Have you been there? So you can use this to kind of expand the topic if you're talking to somebody at a restaurant. I think it's really important when you're tutoring a student to first start, though, with asking your student, where do you need to speak in English? And whom do you have trouble conversing with? So I really recommend, and I'm sure you're already doing this, that you have a notebook and you take notes every time you meet your student. You date it, and when you ask them a question like this, where do you need to speak in English, or whom do you have trouble conversing with, you write this down. So then whenever you're going about your daily life, you might be thinking of new ways to help them speak English more clearly. And one of the places where most students have trouble speaking English is at the doctor's office. And this is one thing that I highly recommend that I do myself. I always make a list, and you should tell your student, always make a list of the questions they want to ask the doctor, and they should show that list to the med tech who does their intake and to their doctor. And you might even tell your student to ask the med tech to please write down the doctor's answers for you. Or you use that reflective speech to make sure you understand what the doctor's directions are. I'm going to skip forward now to my reflective speech. Let me see. Reflective listening or speaking. When you are doing reflective listening or speaking, two people take turns speaking. And I teach my students this in level 1, 2, or 3 about reflective listening and speaking. The first person speaks, and then the second person reflects. They say what they think they heard. I did that with Shannon earlier when she was talking about her student, and she said she wants to help the student that she tutors vary her conversation. She wants to increase her vocabulary. So the first person speaks, the second person says what they think they heard. The first person then says, like Shannon did, yes, Nancy, you're correct, or no, that's not what I said. Then the second person reflects again, making sure they heard correctly. I repeated what I heard Shannon say. And this is something that I think you should practice with your students every time you meet. They have trouble listening and understanding what Americans say. And if they use this reflective speech, reflective listening, and tell the person they're conversing with that they're an ESL student, that if they're learning to speak English, the person they're speaking with will be very cooperative and will do this reflective sharing. If we have time, we might want to try this in breakout rooms where you would talk about a topic. It can be any kind of topic, like what makes you laugh or what makes you cry. And you can try this with your students. You can try any kind of topic you want, where you ask them a question, they give you an answer, you reflect back what you heard them say, and they say yes or no, that was correct. Then you ask them to ask you a question. You say something, they tell you what they heard you say. And this, students, can be very important at a doctor's office, especially with the med tech, the person that does the intake, because they're usually much more willing to spend time with the patient. The doctor is often very busy. But if you have a list and your student has a list and you say, doctor, can you tell me how many times I need to do this exercise? If you have a problem with your foot and you're getting some kind of foot exercise, and the doctor tells you, and then you say, doctor, I heard you say, and the doctor will say yes or no. And this is a good technique they can learn to make sure that they clearly understand the doctor's directions or the physical therapist's directions. These are kind of places where it's critical that they get the correct information, especially if it's a medication, how often to give it before you eat or after you eat. These kind of things are important for the student to make sure they've got the information correctly. Another place the reflective speaking and listening could be used is at a parent-teacher conference. Here again, if the student is a parent and has specific questions they want to ask the teacher, it's smart to write them down and to show the teacher the questions they want to ask. And when the teacher answers them, they should reflect back what they heard the teacher say to make sure they got it correctly. They can even say, could you give me a minute so I can write that down? I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. And I want to see, does anybody have a question about what I just shared?
Nancy, I have a question about the reflective reflective speaking. My student have difficulty understanding English terms. So when I ask her a question, she gets stuck on one word, and so the whole question is, we're focusing on that word. So how do you get around that?
You write the word down, you define the word, and then you do the conversation again. If you do the same conversation more than once, that term will be easier the second time. And if you write it in your notebook, you can start the next session with that same conversation and see that term then is something that they can more quickly get past to hear the rest of the conversation. So write down any words your student is having trouble with and ask them to also write it down and define it. And then maybe if you're only meeting once a week, Teresa, maybe you'll think of another situation where you could use that same term,
Okay.
different context.
Mm-hmm.
And little by little, you can build on that.
Okay.
Does
Sounds
that help?
good. Yep, that sounds good.
Anybody else? Questions? Don't see a hand. I'm going to go back to my slides. Okay. Now, it's also important that students know how to end a conversation so they're not too abrupt. And so it's often a good idea to signal that you're needing to leave the conversation and you make up some kind of excuse for leaving. Like, I need to pick my kids up in a few minutes, or I've got to start dinner, or I have another appointment. But if you're having a conversation and you want to end the conversation, it's smart for a student to learn how to kind of signal that they need to leave the conversation. And if they're enjoying the company of the person they're talking to, they might ask, would you please give me your phone number or your email address because I'd like to talk to you again. And so you can ask, and most people will be willing to say, yes, I'll be glad to give you my email, or I'll be glad to give you my phone number. And it's always nice if you show appreciation. If somebody took time to speak to you or speak to you slowly, teach your student to say, thank you so much for talking with me. You made my day. If you say something like that to somebody, they're much more likely to want to talk to you again. Everybody likes to know that when you talk to them, you've made their day, you've made them feel good. It makes it makes you feel like, yes, I want to talk to this person again. I'm helping them. And I think most people love to help others. And it's nice to say at the end, have a nice day, have a nice evening, have a great weekend. This kind of closing when you end a conversation. Now, in my opinion, you should teach students that conversation means talking together, exchanging ideas and opinions. And you should talk to them about this word opinions, that it's smart for them to say, it's my opinion that Joe Biden is a good president. It's my opinion that Joe Biden isn't a good president. You can say it's my opinion and you don't offend somebody. If you say Joe Biden's a dirty rat, that is offensive to many people. Just like saying Donald Trump is a bad guy is offensive to some people. But if you say it's my opinion, that's different. I think it's important for students to learn when they're in a conversation that they don't say absolutes like I'm right and you're wrong. Instead, you should teach your student how important it is to be open-minded, to say, this is my opinion, what is your opinion, and to be accepting of others' opinions. You don't have to agree with them, but you have to respect them. And so I think it's important in conversations that you let your students know that it's important for them to be respectful of everyone's opinions, everyone's beliefs, everyone's religion, everyone's whatever. Here in the United States, we're supposed to be opening and welcoming. You have the right to your beliefs. I have the right to mine. And in a good conversation, everyone should listen as much as they talk. So if there are 3 people, you should be talking 1/3 of the time, and you should be listening 2/3 of the time. Now, for somebody like me, let me see here. If you're like me, I have to constantly remind myself to be quiet and listen more because I'm a big talker. And so I think it's really important for you to let your students know that in a conversation, they should be stopping themselves and listening and then contributing and then listening. That this is what a good conversation is. Now, before I go on, any questions about that? Okay, now I'm going to talk to you about something that's a little bit tricky, and that's your name. Now, when I have students, and of course their names they're from all different kind of countries, and their names are all often unusual names for me, I never, ever, ever try to give my students a nickname that's an American name. I think that's inappropriate. That's my opinion. I think everybody's name is their name, and it's an important name. Their parents named them that name, and it's their God-given name. You know, it's their name. But I also know that most Americans will not speak to somebody if they can't pronounce your name. They won't speak to you because they're embarrassed. They can't pronounce it or they can't remember it. So I often encourage my students to give themselves a nickname, shortening their long name. If they have a big long name, I encourage them to shorten their name and give themselves a nickname that's part of their name, or to go by their last name if it's easier to pronounce. And many of my students do that, and they find that they're very comfortable with it. But I never, ever say they have to. It's just if they wish. And often they're very happy to find out that it's easier for their classmates to talk to them, to remember their names, if it's not so long. I wish I could give you an example, but I also think it's important that you are careful with the kind of nicknames they give themselves, because I've had students who've given themselves nicknames of homie, and homie is not a good nickname, or because somebody might construe that to homosexual or something. And, you know, so they have to know that certain names are appropriate here and some are not. Just like, I'll give you an example, the word Fanny. Fanny is a nickname for, I'm trying to think for what name in Spanish. And we have fanny packs that we wear if we're traveling and we want to carry our important papers around our waist. We wear a fanny pack. But in England, fanny is a dirty word. It's referring to a woman's private parts. So if you travel in England and you refer to your fanny pack, somebody is likely to tap you on the shoulder and say, Please don't use that word. It's offensive here. And they call it a bum pack instead. So names are the same way. You know, you have to know what's appropriate, what's inappropriate in a different culture. Does anybody have a comment or something they wanted to add to that?
Shelley just posted in the chat that her student has a long name. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but he uses initials, JC,
Yes,
which is drawn from his name, which sounds like a great idea.
absolutely. I've had students, and I pulled that up, and I think that's a great idea. I've had students do that too. And I think JC is a cute nickname. Absolutely. So you're not changing your name, you're just making it easier for people to remember and pronounce. That's what I tell them, if they want to.
I have a comment.
Sure.
I've had quite a few Korean students as well as African students. As a courtesy to them, I think, and as I think it's incumbent on us to learn how to say their names.
I agree.
And they're very happy to help me to do it phonetically at first. And after we do it a number of times, the name rolls off of our tongue as if it were Mary or anything else. But I mean, I want my name and I think they want theirs, and I think we should learn them. That's my opinion.
Carol, I like your opinion. And I also agree with you that it's very important for us to learn to pronounce people's names. And I commend you for doing that with your student. I think that's great. Anybody else? Okay, I'm going on. I'm going to show you a book, American Manners and Customs, and I've got it on my, excuse me, I'm going to reshare. And I know that you have this book in your library at Lori's offices. American Manners and Customs by Elizabeth Clare, a guide for newcomers. I really think that it would be a great idea if you had this book and if you discussed a page of this book with your students every time you get together, because of course they talk about names, they talk about meeting people, small talk, smiling, body languages, manners around doors, coughs and sneezes, table manners, restaurant manners, manners between men and women, visiting somebody in the hospital. How clean can you get? I don't know if any of you've had that problem, but in some cultures, you know, using deodorant isn't something they normally do. And that can be a very touchy subject if you're in a group of people, when we're in a classroom and somebody has a body odor that the other classmates do not like. This can be a very tricky topic to discuss. So, but this chapter, How Clean Can You Get, kind of can help. Getting and giving a gift, sexual harassment, showing emotions, telephone manners, and road manners. So lots of good information, even though this book is from 2004. It has lots of good information. I really recommend it. I'm going on here. Let's see. I'm in the wrong spot here. Let me find my place. Sorry. Oop. Where was my thing? Well, I don't have my slide for American Manners. I'll go on. At any rate, I would recommend this book, American Manners. And you could have a wonderful conversation. You could read a page with your student and you could have a wonderful conversation about American manners and customs using this book as a guide.
I'll just say, Nancy, this is Lori, that I will Xerox or scan rather a couple of lessons from that American Manners book and put that on our SharePoint drive. If anybody
Wonderful.
on this call is interested in just trying it out with their students, they can email me and I will send them the link. And that could be something they
Absolutely.
could use during remote tutoring.
Super. That's a great idea. All right. So I know also Kathy has, Lori has these Kathy's cards in her, in her library of resources for you. I can show you one of the cards. These Kathy's cards have topics that you can then talk about with your student. Where do you like to shop? Or do you like to shop where? Name 5 stores. What are your favorite drinks? These are topics for discussion. If you want to have a conversation with your student and you don't have some conversation ideas, a great place to get ideas is from Kathy's cards. And here again, these are in your library at Lori's office, right, Lori?
Yes, that's right.
I also really like this website, students, called Breaking News English. And I'm going to pull that up and reshare it. Make sure you can see it.
Yep, we can see it.
Can you see it? Oh, good. This is a website you can go to. It's called Breaking News. And with Breaking News, what I like the most about this is that it has levels, everything from level 0, whoops, sorry about that, level 0 to level 6. And if you go, world's deepest dive pool opens in Dubai, if you open this up at 0 level, let's hope it opens up. What is this? I must have clicked on something wrong. Sorry. Let me go back. I did something wrong. Sorry, I'm going to start over again. I going to my breaking news. Can you see my breaking news?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, sorry about that. Let's see if I just go to this, if it'll open up. Start. I don't want to start. All right, so here it is. Unfortunately, you get lots of ads on this, but here's Dubai, has records for the tallest skyscraper and largest shopping mall. That's at 0 level. And they will have level 1, 2, and 3. If you go to 3, you will see that it gets harder so that your reading is more complex. But with both, you will have questions that you can discuss. You will have vocabulary. You will have questions, true, false, matching, all kinds of stuff for you to discuss with your student about this breaking news deep dive in Dubai. So let me go back here. All different kinds of lessons. And a great place for you to read with your students and find out what their interests are. Because scientists warn of more extreme hot weather. You know, there's all different kinds of articles about here swimmers angry over a ban on swim caps. Flying cars, flies from one city to another. So depending on your student and what they're interested in, there are many, many, many different lessons. And you can talk about them. All right, I'm going to go back to my slides. I can find them. Let's see, where's my slides? Nope. Sorry. No. I'm having a technical glitch, sorry. I have to go back and find my slides. Maybe here. I go back here. So students, you can see that I'm not perfect when it comes to these handling this technology myself. I'm 71 years old and I learned a lot through COVID. And I had to learn to teach over Zoom, and I find that I just love it, but I do have some technical difficulties now and then. All right, let me see where I am. Breaking news, side by side. Okay, this is another book that we use a lot in the Troy schools. And let me show you this book. Going over here, sorry, I'm using my hover cam. All right, so here's side by side. And this is book 3. This is book 1. Book 1 is for beginners. Book 2 and 3 are for intermediates. Book 4 is for advanced. But what I like about this book, side by side, is it gives you a guided conversation. So it gives you a conversation pattern. And this is the pattern, it's A and B. The students would be paired up, or you would be paired with your student, and one time you would be A and one time you would be B. And then you have to substitute these 9 different situations using that same conversation. And on some of the pages, you not only follow the same conversation pattern, you also create one of your own, an original conversation. So if I were going to do this with Margaret, Margaret, could you unmute yourself and could you do A and B with me? Will you please be A and I'll be B?
Okay. I'll be B.
You be A, I'll be B.
Okay. What are you doing?
I'm practicing the piano.
Do you practice the piano very often?
Yes, I do. I practice the piano whenever I can. Now we're going to switch and we're going to use situation 1, and I'm going to have to teach the student to look at the picture carefully to figure out what's going on and to use that same pattern. So this time I'm going to be A and Margaret's going to be B. So I'm going to say, A, what's Carol doing? And Carol will answer, Carol is B. So Margaret, what will you say? What's Carol doing? She's
watching the news.
Excuse me, she's not Carol. What's Carol doing? We're talking about Carol. So when we're talking about somebody, you say she's. Carol is a woman, so we would say she's. So Margaret, you'd say,
she's watching the news.
She's watching the news. Good. We're using present progressive tense. So you would talk to the student about the present progressive tense. With you, you use I. With Carol, you use she. And then I would say, does Carol practice the piano very often?
Yes, she does. She practices every day.
She practices whenever she can.
Oh, I didn't, okay.
That's fine. It doesn't have to be exactly the right, or exactly the same. But you would do this with your student, and then at the end, you would have them help you create a new dialogue. And dialoguing is conversing. So these books are a wonderful, wonderful, in my opinion, resource. Here's back at level 1, but it's not that easy. Let's look at this. We have A and B. So Teresa, will you do this with me? Will you be A and I'll be B?
Excuse me, is there a laundromat in this neighborhood?
Yes, there's a laundromat on Main Street next to the supermarket. Now, Teresa, I'm going to be A and you're going to be B, and I'm going to say, excuse me, is there a drugstore in this neighborhood? And Teresa, you would say,
Yes, there's a drugstore on Main Street across from the church.
yes, it's on Main Street across from the church. And so
Right.
I would be teaching them prepositions, next to, on, whatever. I just think that this is a wonderful resource, these side-by-side books. And
This is that's one, that was book one.
this is book one here.
Okay.
And this is there's book 2, 3, and 4. These are wonderful, wonderful resources, in my opinion. Something that we use a lot in the Troy schools. Now, besides that, let's keep going here. Go back to my slides. All right. I wanted to show you this book. The Pizza Tastes Great. They have dialogues and stories. So I don't know if you've got this in your library, but if you don't, I bet you Lori would get it for you. The Pizza Tastes Great has dialogues and stories. And here again, you're teaching the students all different kinds of vocabulary and contractions. Here's a story about a picnic, and you can talk about what you see in the picture first. Then there's a dialogue between two people. You ask questions about what you said, and then here's your conversation. Do you like picnics? Do you go on picnics? Where do you go for a picnic? All kinds of things. I love this. The Pizza Tastes Great because they have lots of dialogues, lots of stories, and lots of good things to discuss. With my students, I have a lending library for them. And these kind of books are in the lending library, and I encourage the students to read them, and we talk about them. Sometimes I even read the stories out loud to my students. This is my favorite book, Sarah Plain and Tall. It's written at the 3rd grade reading level. And it's a Newbery Award-winning book. If you have never read this book, Sarah Plain and Tall, you can read this as an adult, and I'm telling you, you will love this story. It's all a movie that you can watch on YouTube. But Sarah Plain and Tall is written at the 3rd grade reading level. So the conversation that you can have about this book and the vocabulary is easy in this book. My favorite. There's also a series of books. They're called The Gem Open Door. And these books are written by regular authors, but they're written for, this is original works by modern writers. They're designed to enhance adult literacy. They were for adult literacy in Ireland, but they're written for adults, so they're adult theme. I love this one, Ma Vinci's The Builders. I love Cecilia Ahern's Mrs. Whippy. I love Marion Keyes' No Dress Rehearsal. I love these books, and these books are from the Gem Open Door series, and they're books for adults, but adults that are learning to read in English or learning to read. Okay, let me see. I'm getting close to the end here. There's my books. Picture dictionaries. If you don't have a picture dictionary, if your students don't have a picture dictionary, I highly encourage them to buy one. Let me show you this picture dictionary. Picture dictionaries can come in This is Oxford's Picture Dictionary. This one is only in English, but they have many of them that are English Chinese, English Spanish. But you know, these books are full of pictures, and they can be so helpful for you to discuss things with students and have a conversation. Here's everyday language, people, housing, food, clothing, health, community, transportation, job search, workplace, academic studies, recreation. My goodness, these books are just wonderful for talking to them about if they're going to a store and they want to know about fabrics, if they want to know about sleeve lengths, if they want to know about sizing, about getting a haircut or hair coloring. You know, these books could be something that they could leave on their dining room table and the family could use to talk about things in English, about health fairs, you name it. I love picture dictionaries and places to go in our city. They can talk about places to go to visit, traveling, outdoor recreation. But you can then open up to a page in the picture dictionary and you and your student could talk about it and share information. Okay, let me see. Have I finished what I wanted to share with you? Yes. So this is where I want questions, comments, and other ideas. And Shannon, I didn't really answer your question about how to expand vocabulary, but I can tell you that if a student uses the same word over and over again, I would write it down in my notebook and I would then brainstorm with them other words to use that would have the same meaning. And then I would encourage her or him to use another word instead of using the word nice or good or fine, and try to expand the vocabulary that way.
Thank you, Nancy.
Anybody else have a question for me or something they would like to share about how you approach conversation with your students that you're tutoring? Yes, Isabel? Unmute yourself. You're muted, Isabel.
Excuse me, I was so concentrating on listening. I have a book that I share with a student.
Good.
And I'd like to show it to you because
Please.
it is mystery solving. And this book is a group of short stories with the solutions are in the book as well. And there are puzzles, and what we do is we sometimes will read the solution before reading the story, which helps the student to understand what is written. And
Fantastic.
And let me show you the book. It is called Murder at the Chessboard.
Murder at the Chessboard.
Yes. And it's there. I'm trying to get it in focus for you.
I can see it.
And then the title, my student got it on Amazon.
Good. And how long is the story?
It's a series of short stories.
So how long is each story?
About 2 pages average.
So not too long. So you can.
No, a couple of them are 3 pages long, 4 pages. That's the most.
2 to 4 pages long. That's good.
Now I'll tell you the story about Murder at the Chessboard. I'm sorry, I know we're running out of time, but what it was to do with it's a series of characters that are repeated throughout the book, and there are puns on the names, such as the names that they use are Quick Solve, Detective Quick Solve.
And so you're having to teach idioms too.
It's a lot of idiomatic speech in here, but it's good because it also puts a little humor into the book.
I love it.
Murder at the chessboard, the solution was because, are you familiar with monochromatic chess?
No.
Monochromatic chess is where you do not use the horse or the knight, because he jumps onto the white, from the black to the white. So all the other pieces on the chessboard use only one color. You know, they use all black.
Right.
Or all white. They do not change from one to the other. And that is monochromatic chess. And that's how it was solved. The mystery was solved at the chessboard. And the student absolutely loved that. And we've been sharing this book.
I think that is terrific.
Yes. And what's so nice about it, as I said, it has the solutions for each story at the back of the book. So often we will share the solution first in order to understand the story. And that's really helped this one student to understand English a little bit better in terms of using idiomatic speech, because we use that a lot in conversation. And you know, that's something that wasn't really brought up today, but I know that is something.
Absolutely, I should have, because Americans use so many idioms.
It's because I was listening, and I like to incubate a little bit what I hear, and then think about it before I say anything, because I don't want to put my foot in my mouth using another idiom.
I think that is great, and especially you have the students buy-in if they found the book.
Yes,
and interested in the topic.
Yes.
It's a win-win-win.
Yes, and it is rather fun to share something like that.
And fun is like the frosting on the cake. Yes.
And it's not childish, because some students feel, oh, this is too childish for me.
Yes.
Anyway, that was my input. So thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. Thank you. Anybody else have something they want to share? I love that title. I'm going to look for it.
Please do. I think you might like the book. You might even enjoy the book, because
I think so.
It keeps your mind active. And it's funny.
Thank you.
This is Lori. I just shared in the chat a link to some other wordless picture stories that we have.
Oh, good.
Right. There's just about 5 of them that also are great for sparking conversation. You can have your student look at the pictures and then tell you the story that's being enacted. Does anybody else have any other questions about conversations for Nancy, or comments of things that they like to do to spark conversation?
No, just thank you. It was fun to hear ideas.
Thank you, Isabel.
Yep.
All right, then we're going to wrap this up. I'm going to stop the recording.